So what I also would like to do, and there's been a few issues that have come up in the questions that have already been submitted so far this evening. I'd like to pick up on some questions that we received in advance of this evening's webinar, and also in the context of follow-up to last night's webinar. I'm going to pick a couple of areas just to focus on for the moment, and I'd ask colleagues maybe in responding that they might pick up on a couple of the questions that have come in on the list of questions this evening also, and then I'll open up to questions from the floor. So the first topic I just wanted to pick up on was in relation to eco-schemes. We've had a number of questions in on eco-schemes both before the webinar, and also we've seen a number of questions come in so far. So I'm going to ask my colleague David Buckley just to quickly respond. David, first of all, to outline the questions that we've received, and maybe to give a brief response in terms of where we're going there, but also again, I suppose we'd underline the fact that we are interested in your views on this, and not just in terms of responding to questions on the department's views on these areas. So David.
Yep, thanks Paul. Okay, good evening everybody. All right, I have a good few questions to go through here, so I'll go through them as quickly as I possibly can. So there's a question here, can the department confirm the following: if a farmer has 20 entitlements but is farming 40 hectares, for example, that he or she will receive the eco payment on the 40 hectares? So the straight answer is yes. So the payment in the eco scheme, it's based on eligible hectares regardless of the number of payment entitlements a farmer holds. Therefore, in theory, yeah, the farmer with 40 eligible hectares but only 20 payment entitlements could receive an eco payment on all 40 hectares, subject to, of course, the farmer actually complying with the scheme, the eco scheme requirements. That's the first question. The second one: will the eco scheme include measures which can be undertaken in addition to other schemes such as OFS? So same again, first straight answer is yes. But what we will be trying to do, in as much as possible, is to avoid overlaps between in actions between eco and other department schemes, because that creates complexities for farmers themselves, complexities for advisors, and then also complexities for the department when it comes to paying. So in as much as possible, we'll be trying to avoid overlap, but it does in no way mean that a farmer cannot be in BIS, eco, into OFS, into GLAS, or whatever the new AECM may well be called. Okay, that's the second question. Third question, query about tree planting measures proposed under eco scheme. So the straight answer is, so no decision has been made one way or the other on whether tree planting would be included within an eco scheme. However, the reality is there will be some actions by their very nature may well be more suitable to a multi-annual scheme, where you'll be looking for environmental benefits over a period of time rather than in one particular year. Fourth question, Paul, here: will the organic maintenance payments be in an eco scheme? So at this point, no. The position, so to speak, at the minute is that there would be a separate standalone organics measure then within Pillar 2, which would cover both transition, those farmers that are in transition, and those fully converted. But clearly we're in consultation mode, so we'd certainly welcome people's views on what they consider on that. A fifth question: how will farmers qualify? And the problem with eco schemes is that a cut is what funds them out of every farmer's BPS. So first and foremost, and Ted would have touched on this, so all farmers are eligible. Firstly, people will apply through their BIS annually from 2023 onwards. And just to reiterate exactly what Ted said previously, we want as many farmers to participate, because to deliver environmental benefit that we want these schemes to do, we ultimately need farmers to participate in the first instance. Sixth question then, so it says, very important that ECO has actions with proven direct environmental benefit. Inclusion of actions with questionable benefits is a waste of money and sends a poor signal. So clearly nobody could disagree with that. We all want positive environmental benefits, but we also need to be clear at the start that to deliver those benefits, we actually fundamentally need the farmers to participate in the scheme and want to participate in the first instance. The seventh question, Paul, I'm nearly near the end. So will the eco scheme per hectare payment, though flat, be geared in any way to covering the cost of the interventions farmers are expected to carry out to receive? If not, how are farmers being encouraged to take part? So at this point, it's intended that yes, the eco scheme in Ireland that will be designed in accordance with Article 28(6)(b), which basically means the actions will be costed based on the cost incurred and the income forgone. So that there has to be an incentive for the farmer to want to participate in the scheme. Three more questions to go through, Paul, briefly. Eighth question: farmers in derogation are going over and above all other measurable in terms of climate mitigation and water quality, and due to all these measures, will these farmers automatically be included and therefore eligible for the Eco-scheme payment? So the straight answer is no, we don't envisage at this point that a farmer that's in derogation just by default therefore gets their Eco-scheme money. They're certainly clearly eligible to apply for an Eco-scheme, and that's exactly what we want farmers to do, and we'll be ensuring that there are appropriate actions for that cohort of farmers to want to take up. But certainly it would not be just because they're a derogation farmer they therefore automatically receive their Eco payment. The 9th question is, and I'm paraphrasing here, but effectively will farmers have to spend money to qualify for Eco-schemes? So I'm repeating a little bit here, but as I said, we intend that at this point that the actions will be costed in accordance with 28.6b, so therefore costs incurred and income forgone. So if you look at the consultation document and where it talks about Eco-schemes on page 23 and 24, some actions a farmer may well have costs to incur and income forgone. In others, it may well only be income forgone. So it gives an example of an action there of a farmer in extensive livestock production, in which case the payment will be purely based on income forgone and will be compensating farmers for effectively being stocked or farming at a low or a relatively low stocking rate. So in that case, it'll be an income forgone rather than there will be no actual costs incurred. The last question then, Paul, is will woodland creation be part of an Eco-scheme? Not tree planting, but woodland creation. And I suppose, look, just to close out on this, so the final list of actions were not yet finalised, so we certainly would welcome people's ideas, in particular on that. If it's coming in as part of the submission, we shall certainly look at that particular measure. I think, Paul, that's all the ones that I've picked up at the moment. Obviously, I'm sure you'll come back to me if there's more.
Okay, thanks for that, David. Yeah, thanks very much. I think that picks up on most of the questions that I've seen coming through on the webinar screen so far. I wanted to just, again, on a couple of topics, just to finish out before I open up the floor more generally. We had some questions coming into this evening on organics, and also one or two that have come through on the written questions there this evening that have been submitted as well. So again, I'll ask my colleague, Kevin McKeever, on the organic side to respond to those, if you could, please, Kevin.
Yes, thanks, Paul. We'll just look at there's a couple of questions that are probably related. How will the department ensure a sustainable increase in organic farmland each year up to 2027 to reach Ireland's 7.5% target? And then a similar one, can the department explain the logic of incentivising people to become organic, given that the market has not been established and some existing organic juice have to sell at conventional prices? Well, yes, very valid questions. As Ted mentioned earlier in his presentation, a major focus of the new CAP is to deliver on the environment, be it improving biodiversity, climate change mitigation, and animal welfare measures. And organic farming ticks all the boxes in this regard. And the EU's Farm to Fork strategy has a target of 25% organic area average across Europe. So with that in mind, we are currently advising a new and ambitious organic farming scheme to be introduced under this new CAP, and we aim to increase the synergies that exist between organics, agri-environment limit measures, and the eco-schemes, as David has just alluded to, and thus to make organic farming a more attractive farming option. In addition, the department we're fully committed to the strategy for the agri sector, and in that strategy there are measurable strategic objectives for each subsector. Incorporates actions considered essential to further support the industry's development and to achieve growth targets. So this is also in line with the Programme for Government commitment for developing domestic and international organic markets. And indeed, to ensure that farmers have access to premium paying markets for their projects. And in the programme for government is also the 7.5% organic area target, so we are working towards that. As everyone well knows, that the current profile and structure of the Irish organic sector largely dictates the challenges for the sector in meeting the market opportunities. And while the area under organic production has increased, production patterns aren't fully aligned with market opportunities, and most organic farmers are engaged in beef and sheep production, with a relatively low number engaged in tillage and dairy. So our overriding challenge is to ensure that the development of production of organic food products is in line with market requirements and consumer demand. And this is the key to the long-term sustainable growth of the Irish organic food sector. The Organic Farming Scheme, which opened earlier this year, is targeted at these areas of production in deficit, such as cereals, horticulture and dairy. And there's also huge opportunities for growth in the export market for beef and lamb, where Borbia are assisting in developing markets for our exporters. A sustainable increase in organic farmland will be driven not just by the Organic Farming Scheme, but by a number of approaches, including developing markets to ensure that the organic farm is a more attractive fashion. Another question that has come in was, how will priority access for organic farming in the AECM work in practice? And here we would be similar to what we've done in GLAS previously, and that is that registered organic farmers, they qualified for priority access to GLAS by selecting actions that were appropriate to their farm. So it is proposed that this will again be the case for the new Agri-Environment climate measure under this strategic plan. It is envisaged that farmers who avail of such priority access will be required to state when they're applying that they have registered with one of the organic certification bodies, and once that is checked out, they will receive priority access, subject of course to satisfying eligibility requirements, acceptance of the terms and conditions, and any budgetary or intake limits may be there at such time. Another question that was mentioned, why are grants for organic farming scheme limited, having a minimum amount of hectares and a minimum stocking density? Well, firstly, on the hectarage, the minimum amount, 3 hectares for farmers and 1 hectare for hort farmers, and we don't believe that is preventing farmers coming into the scheme. So it is a level that we have set, but we'd welcome people's comments if they believe that such it's set too high. And then with regard to the minimum stocking density, so under the current organic farming scheme, there is a minimum stocking rate requirement of 32.5 kgs of nitrogen per hectare per annum, declared on farmer's BPS application. So this is an extensive stocking rate and would be an equivalent to half a suckler cow per hectare, so a suckler cow per 2 hectares, which is a very extensive limit. Now, farmers not reaching that level will receive payment on a pro rata basis.
Right, Kevin, I think we lost you there. My apologies. I
based
think
on
we've
their
lost
level
connection.
of production. Now, the main reason for the minimum stocking rate requirement by organics. Sorry, Paul. So
No,
just,
sorry,
just
Kevin,
to
we lost.
continue there, the stocking rate requirement will. Did you lose me there, Paul? So just to finish, the stocking rate requirement will be reviewed, and we'll take on board any comments that people may have. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Kevin. I'm just going to finish with two areas if I can, please. We had a couple of questions on the Agri-Environment climate measure as well, and also on TAMS, on on-farm investments. So I'm going to ask my two colleagues, Josephine Brennan, first of all, to deal with a couple of questions on the Agri-Environment climate measure, and also then Oliver Malloy to deal with the TAMS questions that we've received up until now, and also this evening. So if I could ask Josephine first, there are a few questions that we had on the Agri-Environment climate measure. Josephine, maybe you could take those first, and then, as I say, Oliver, I'm conscious of the fact that I think I did say earlier on we will open up to questions and give people the opportunity to ask questions directly. I know that there may be issues with people's access to microphones, and we're just trying to establish exactly where we are on that at the moment. So I will invite people to come in as soon as I have fully established that shortly. But I'll just get those remaining questions dealt with on the AECM and on TAMS in the meantime. So Josephine first.
Thanks, Paul. So good evening, everybody. So I'm going to just run through a few questions that we got in relation to the new agri-environmental scheme. So essentially the replacement, the GLAS replacement. So there's a number of questions. I'll go through them as quickly as I can. So the first question, will there be another rollover of the GLAS scheme for next year? So I suppose this question is related to the transitional period of 2022 rather than the specific subject of this meeting. But just the GLAS contractual period for GLAS 3, it ends on the 31st of December 2021, and the contractual period for GLAS 1 and 2 participants who opted to extend their contracts, they also expire on the 31st of December. So, and it should be noted that the 10th Amendment of the Rural Development Programme approved by the EU Commission, it provides for the possibility for the extension of GLAS in 2022, and as with all relevant rural development schemes, consideration of an extension, it will be subject to the availability of national funding to the process in the autumn. So, and if there are any changes to the terms and conditions of the scheme, the department, it will notify participants in writing directly in line with the procedures that were followed for the previous extension. Question 2, will new applicants be eligible for the new AECM scheme? So the answer to this is yes. So any eligible farmer in any part of the country, they will have the opportunity to participate in the general scheme, and the scheme, it will be open to all active farmers. But to qualify for the higher payments, a farmer must have land with higher environmental priorities. These areas are currently being defined by the department. So access to the scheme, it will be determined through a ranking and selection process similar to that of GLAS. Priority access will be provided to organic farmers and farmers with priority assets, and farmers who agree to undertake specific priority actions. So question 3, why make it difficult for commonage farmers to access the agri-environmental schemes by imposing the controversial collective agreement restriction? So the new AECM scheme is building on previous schemes, so it's building on REPS, EOS and GLAS. And the collective management plan, so known as the CMP, which was brought into GLAS, this addressed the deficiencies in the management of the commonage by shareholders who farmed individually in REPS and EOS. So the cooperation projects that are being proposed for the new AECM, they will build on the experiences of managing commonages which have been trialled by several EIP projects, and they will be adjusted and combined where possible. So I suppose the collective they propose flexibility, local adaptability and effective targeting of measures to deliver for biodiversity, water and climate actions. Question 4, what say will the farmer have in deciding the right action in the right place? So the farm advisor is essential to the process of the new AECM, and the farm advisor will prepare the plan in conjunction with the farmer for actions like those relating to the protection of water, which will be one of our priority assets. This will be facilitated by the use of up-to-date mapping information, which will be provided by the department. This will ensure that the plan works both for the farmer and is suitable for the landscape. Question 5. Under the AECM, can the department define results-based? So there's a number of elements to this question. I'll just read it all out first. So define results-based, and then, for example, if a farmer carries out an action in full but the result is not delivered, for example, due to drought or disease, does this mean the farmer will not be paid? And then who is going to inspect results-based payments? So for the first part then, I suppose, to define results-based, essentially results-based payments are payments that are linked to nature quality on your farm, and the quality is assessed through a scoring assessment, and this is specifically designed for the specific biodiversity or environmental target, and the target must be present on the farm to deliver the outcome. So results-based payments, they reward farmers for committed environmental effort, and they link payments to quality. So the higher the quality, the higher the payment. Then who is going to inspect results-based payments? So DAFM will be responsible, but the scoring will be carried out by the trained advisors, similar to the pilot project REAP. There's a question there was another part to that question in terms of if results-based is not delivered, for example, due to drought or disease, then indicators that are used and designed for each of the results-based aspects, they should be robust enough to avoid issues with drought and diseases. There's a question relating to rewetting. Under the land rewetting proposal, how does the department intend to protect neighbouring landowners from potential negative impacts? So I suppose the details on land rewetting are still being considered, but this is a very valid question. And we are aware that there may be potential impacts, but again, I suppose all the details and the extent of the rewetting still have to be worked out. Then there's a question in relation to agroforestry. How does it fit in with the new CAP? So we don't specifically have forestry measures in the new AECM or the new CAP, but we do have a strong emphasis on tree planting in the new AECM. So there's a number of proposed measures in the AECM, including planting trees. So we've different options in terms of planting rows or groups of trees, planting trees in riparian margins, tree belts to capture ammonia from the farmyard. We also have a proposed measure for planting a traditional orchard, and then again we are proposing to have planting new hedgerow. A new hedgerow is one of our measures. Question 8, GLAS had a term, if a farmer died without notice, the family lose the GLAS programme. Will this be removed? So I suppose currently in GLAS, under the provisions of force majeure, while the original contract owner is deceased, the contract can be cancelled without recruitment of money paid. Or alternative, the person entitled can apply to the department to take over that contract. So a similar approach is proposed for the new AECM. There's a question then on organic farming. So will an organic farmer be able to claim the full Agri-Environment scheme? Will there be issues regarding double funding? And how does the DAFM see organic farming fitting into the AECM and avoid double funding as per the current GLAS? So I suppose at this stage it's not possible for us to outline the next organic farming scheme and how that may interact with the Eco-scheme or the next Agri-Environmental scheme, but just to say that the department is aiming to increase the synergies that exist between organics, Agri-Environment, climate measures and the Eco-scheme, and thus make organic a more attractive option. And it should be noted that restrictions on double funding will also apply under the new CAP as were in the current GLAS scheme. So I think, Paul, they are all the questions I have to run through for now. So thank you.
Okay, thanks for those, Josephine. And I'm just going to finish for the moment with Oliver Malloy on our on-farm investment side to just pick up on some of the questions we've received both before and in the course of the webinar on-farm investments. So Oliver, if you could briefly take us through that. Just before Oliver does, just to mention to everybody that we are just going through the questions in a kind of a grouped format or in a topical format, because there are a lot of questions coming in. We can't respond obviously to every one of them individually, but we are picking up on the questions that we've received both before the webinar and in the course of this evening, and getting colleagues to answer them in a kind of a group format. So we'll do that. I will come to some more of the specific questions from this evening in a moment and call in colleagues also to answer those. Again, like I say, we're just establishing who has microphones as well, so we'll give people an opportunity to come in and ask particular questions shortly. So just bear with us on that. But I will ask Oliver maybe just to respond for the moment on the on-farm investment questions that we've received.
Thank you, Paul. Good evening, everybody. First question, will there be grant aid support for dairy farmers and dairy equipment? There most definitely will be support in relation to all farmers, particularly the dairy farmers. At this point in time, we have no defined list of what investments will be included on the current, on the proposed scheme. So at this point in time, we don't have a list of whether or not dairy equipment specifically will be or will not be included. That has yet to be decided. A question in relation to the age limit for the new entrants. It'll be the proposal for the young farmer will be similar to what we have under the current scheme. That is, the applicant has to be less than 41 years of age at the time of application. Third question in relation to ceilings and investment ceilings for the on-farm capital investment scheme. Unfortunately, we cannot make a decision on that. It's very much influenced by the overall budget for the scheme. So when approval is given for the scheme and budget allocation is made, then a decision will be made in relation to the individual ceilings for each individual, and also whether or not the additional funding will be given to partnerships. Question in relation to the grant rates. The proposal at this time is to have 40% grant aid with 60% grant aid for specific investments and for the young farmer scheme. And finally, then in relation to renewable energy, will there be grant aid available for solar panels and other renewable energy? At this point in time, the proposal is to support applicants that want to invest in renewable energy. So I think that's all the questions I have at this point in time. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Oliver. I was going to go to a couple of questions that I think people want to come in on, but I'm not sure again whether people have microphones. I was going to give, I think both Pat Murphy and Nigel Rinahan from the IFA were with us and wanted to ask a question, but I'm not sure if they have microphones available. My indications that I'm getting here are that they don't. So I will come back in a moment to other questions, maybe from IFA members in a moment. So apologies for that, but I think just that the webcast link that you're operating off does not give an opportunity to use a microphone. Similarly, I think for Pat McCormick from ICMSA, I think there's also an issue there in terms of getting access to a microphone by virtue of the webcast link that's being used. So apologies, gentlemen, I don't think we'll be able to get a chance to get your verbal comments right now, but if you do want to submit comments or questions on the chat, on the written questions, please do so. I was going to pick up just on a couple of questions first before I ask some other people to come in. Just on, we've had quite a few questions coming in around the Suckler Carbon Efficiency Programme, the approach to stock numbers within the Suckler Carbon Efficiency Programme, and some of the rationale behind the approach being taken in terms of numbers and limitation on increase, etc. So, and also I think a few questions around the requirement for participation in quality assurance schemes. So I might ask my colleague Valerie Woods maybe just to pick up on some of those. You've probably seen those coming through on the questions that have been submitted so far this evening, Valerie. So if you could pick up on some of those questions around the areas in relation to stock numbers and also, for instance, on the participation in quality assurance schemes.
Paul, if I could just come in first on the the number cap and quality assurance schemes. And
absolutely,
then
Paul, and good evening, everybody, and thank you much, Paul.
Sorry, I think Maria was going to come in there. Apologies, Val. Maria Dunn was going to come in there.
Sorry, if I could just come in and deal very broadly with questions about...
Sorry, no problem.
a reduction in the Suckler numbers and also about the QAS very broadly. And if I could hand over to Valerie then to answer the more specific questions about the Suckler scheme. And also I see Conor O'Mahony is also on the line, and there's some specific questions about the dairy beef scheme. So look, there's an awful lot of questions there about a proposed cap on the Suckler herd. So just to say, there is not a cap on the Suckler herd proposed in this consultation document. What is in this consultation document is a proposed eligibility condition to prevent expansion under the voluntary Suckler environmental scheme. So just to explain, the logic behind that was to put it in there to see that the environmental efficiency gains through the scheme should not be offset by increased numbers. But to be very clear, and you'll see this in the consultation document, this is the proposed eligibility condition. It has not been agreed by anyone. It is proposed for discussion, and clearly it has been successful in that regard. So look, it's good that it's being discussed, but what I would say to you and encourage you all most sincerely is you should submit your opinions in formal written submissions, because that's the point of this whole consultation. So that's just to deal with that reduction piece there. In regards to QAS, once again, also a proposed eligibility condition that's not been agreed by anyone, but is proposed for discussion. So if I just explain a little bit of our thinking behind it, it might assist you when you come to make your submissions. So we're proposing QAS for 3 schemes. It's not for the entire cap, it's for 3 specific sectoral schemes: the Suckler scheme, the dairy beef and the sheep scheme. So look, beef and the sheep sectors, they are heavily export dependent, and we need to maintain those routes to both EU and wider international markets. We need to maximise them, because if we're just supplying the domestic market, well, then we're going to need a very small agriculture sector, given that it's a very small country. QA certification, it's now a prerequisite in many European markets, and it's an increasing ask across all markets. So that's where we are if we want to grow and diversify export markets. The greater number of cattle and sheep farms that participate in QAS, the better our ability to demonstrate our sustainability credentials, both through tracking their carbon footprint and capturing information on biodiversity. So look, it's key to maintaining our markets, and it's key to collecting data to support our sustainability credentials. And anyone who was involved in the recent, there's been a couple of things on the beef side, the recent PGI application, the Suckler brand that we're developing at the moment, or the Word Be a grass-fed logo, will know that the collection of data was key to all those marketing pieces. So that's why it's proposed, and I again stress that, proposed as an eligibility condition, because it is so important to protect our markets. But again, proposed, so you can cover it in your submissions if you so wish. Sorry, Valerie, I'll hand back over to you. I didn't mean to interrupt there. There's a bit of a time delay on this webinar, so it's quite difficult to coordinate things, but that's just 2 very overarching things. So Valerie, is there other individual questions that you can pick up on there?
Yeah, there are a few other elements, and no problem, Maria. And apologies in advance if my connection is dropped, because I'm having issues with it. So I suppose Maria has covered up the core of the questions have been around the issues that Maria has covered off there in relation to the proposed cap on numbers, and also the eligibility criteria for the livestock schemes generally. There are, as Maria said, like, there are elements of the scheme, and that is one of them, that of the proposed scheme that we are currently discussing internally and that we're looking for views on, and that's the purpose of this session now. There are other elements that maybe could provide some clarity on our thinking around too. One of them is the reference period to be used. That's come up in questions previously. Our thinking currently, and obviously this is subject to discussion internally and we would like opinions on it, our thinking currently is to maybe use an average of a few years to take a reference period for the Suckler scheme particularly. And the reason for that, I suppose, is just to be fair to people who may have temporarily reduced their stock say because they may have participated in BEAM, or perhaps they had TB restrictions or something like that. If they had to depopulate temporarily for any reason, it's to be fair to them. Another thing that we need to consider, obviously we know that new entrants to suckling are going to have to be treated differently in terms of, I suppose, both the reference period that is used for them, and also, I suppose, the capacity that they have to build their herd during the course of the contract. So those are things that we're interested in views on and that we are still discussing internally. There was a provision in the proposal, I suppose, to revise downwards the reference number in the case of farmers reducing their suckler numbers during the contract. Based on feedback that we've got from last evening's session, we're currently examining that now for potential for flexibility on it, just to avoid having any unintended negative impacts on herds. Another thing that's important to note, I suppose, is that the clawback on payments for suckler cows that are disposed of and weren't replaced, which was a feature of the previous BDGP, is gone from this proposal. I think it's important that that's emphasised. I've mentioned new entrants, and the last point, Maria has obviously mentioned the eligibility requirement of membership of QA scheme, and she's explained why that is there. There were some other questions that came in relation to mixing systems. I'm paraphrasing the question now, but it is basically, can you, under the suckler scheme, mix your system if you have a reduced herd? What we're measuring in the context of this scheme particularly, and obviously that's with the caveat that there are other restrictions broader on other schemes, we're measuring the carbon footprint from the animal. So once those parameters are met within the context of this scheme, there isn't an issue with broadening the scope there. So I think kind of those are kind of the main questions. Shout at me if I've missed anything, but those are the main questions that have come in. I'll hand you back to Paul. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that, Val. And Maria mentioned, I think, earlier as well, that there were a couple of questions that came in on the dairy beef welfare scheme as well, I think. So, Conor, I think you were keeping an eye on the questions that were coming in on that you might quickly respond to, and then I'm just going to open up to wider questions from the participants. Sorry, Conor, we're not able to hear you. I'm not sure if there's a problem. Is there a problem with your microphone?
Are you muted, I think?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Microphone is on.
Fine now. Yeah, no, I'm unmuted now. So two questions. One is, should the scheme be solely aimed at dairy farmers who keep their male dairy calves, and beef farmers who buy these calves? The more support these farmers get, the better. My interpretation of that question really is that should dairy farmers who do not keep their male calves for further rearing be excluded from the scheme? So I suppose the scheme is open. There's two measures in the scheme: a young calf measure and a growing calf measure. The young calf measure is open to dairy farmers who essentially will be breeding calves that will be aimed at ultimately at the Irish beef herd. So there's no requirement for these farmers to hold on to retain their calves beyond, say, the initial rearing phase as calves, so that either dairy farmers who purchase in these calves as well as rear their own calves, or specialist calf rearers purchase these calves. I suppose one of the key elements of improving animal welfare, calf welfare on dairy calves, is to improve the quality of these calves. And one of the key elements of doing that is influencing the decision of the breeding dairy herds. So the actions such as sex semen and use of high DBI AI or high DBI beef stock bulls, what you're doing with that is essentially you are reducing the amount of dairy matings that are required for replacement heifers by using sex semen, and that allows dairy farmers then to increase the amount of beef AI or beef stock bull insemination usage on dairy farms. So you will have much better quality dairy beef calves being born on Irish farms, and that will then, the consequence of that will follow through into any calf rearers who purchase these calves and go on to bring either those calves to stores or to finish them themselves. So by targeting the breeding decisions, that's the first step in, I suppose, improving the welfare and quality of all dairy beef calves. That's why they are included. Second question is, how does promoting sex semen, etc., on a professional dairy farm do anything for animal welfare? So by using sex semen, so one of the, if you pick sex semen as an option, you will also be required to either select either high DBI AI bulls or high DBI beef stock bulls. So what will happen, what's the consequence of that? Again, as I've just mentioned earlier, by using sex semen and linking it to the use of high DBI bulls, you're reducing the number of non-replacement calves being born on dairy farms that would be otherwise be low value and low viability and low welfare outcome calves on these farms, and you're increasing the beefing quality and beefing characteristics of the non-replacement calves born on dairy farms through the use of sex semen and high DBI for further rearing and for specialist calf rearers and finishers. So there are the two questions that I saw, Paul, unless anything has come in the immediate past while.
No, that's fine. Thanks very much, Conor. Appreciate that. I'm going to, just to try and, again, like I said, we've been trying to establish who has and who doesn't have microphones. I think that is an issue in terms of how people have joined the webinar this evening. But I think I mentioned earlier, I think does Pat McCormack from ICMSA, I think, Pat, have you a microphone now? I'm going to give you an opportunity to make a comment or ask a question. And I think then John Curran from IFA also has a microphone, so I'm going to ask him to come in after that. And then after that, then Edmund Graham from ICSA, then, if I can. So Pat, first of all, you need to unmute your microphone as well, Pat, if you want to come in here now. I'm not sure, Pat, if you're trying to get through there. I'm not able to pick up anything from your microphone at this point. I'm going to move on and see if we can maybe improve on that in a moment, or try and get that connection. I'm going to move on and ask John Curran. John, I think you wanted to make a comment. I know you'd put a couple of questions, I think, on the list a little earlier, which I think have been dealt with to some extent by colleagues. But did you want to come in and ask a question or make a comment?
According to the system, Paul, John's mic is live, so he just needs to unmute himself, maybe, if he's got the mic icon in front of him.
I hope you heard that, John. John, you need to unmute your microphone. If you...
I am unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now, John. Go ahead.
Is there a proposed cap on the suckler herd based on the national herd or on an individual herd basis? Is the first question. I'd also like to know, like, what is a proposed payment per head on the new suckler and the sheep scheme? On the organic section, will organic farmers automatically qualify their criteria for the eco schemes, and will organic farmers continue to be excluded from environmental schemes? Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks, John. Just on the questions on the suckler, Maria, did you want to maybe make some preliminary comments on that, please, if you don't mind?
If the question on the suckler scheme relates to the increase on suckler cow numbers, it's on an individual level, because what it is if you apply for the suckler scheme and you sign that contract, you're then signing not to increase your suckler cow numbers over a certain level for the period of that contract. So it's on an individual basis. In regards to payment rates under both the suckler cow scheme and the sheep improvement scheme, we're not in a position to give that sort of data at the moment, I assume, and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, perhaps that will be available in the next round of consultation. I don't know, but we wouldn't be in a position to give that data at present.
Okay, no, thanks. Thanks for that, Maria. Just on that more general point in relation to funding and the funding rates, that is still an issue that's to be decided across the board in terms of funding of schemes across the CAP strategic plan. And I think, again, there were one or two questions on that point that came through on the list of questions that we received. So just to make that point, that the funding and the profile of expenditure, like across the schemes in the plan, has not yet been fully decided. That is still subject to ongoing discussion at government level between the department and the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. So just on the organic one, then, I think John's question there related to eco schemes. I think David, I think you had touched on that earlier, but did you want to respond maybe more specifically to John's point on eco schemes? Josephine, maybe you want to come back on environment schemes more generally.
Yeah, that's fine, Paul. I can answer that question, and there's two other quick questions on eco if you want me to go through them at the same time if you wish. So just on John's question there, will someone effectively by default, because they're organics, will that give them their eco money, so to speak? So the straight answer is no decision has been made on that yet. However, the mere fact that a person could well be in organics and therefore in the organic scheme and receiving payment under the organic scheme, if we were going to say by default they're therefore eligible for their eco, they would have to be doing something additional to get their eco money. So it's probably difficult to see what additional more they could be doing that they're not already receiving payment for under the organic farming scheme, if they're in that organic farming scheme. There was just three other quick questions. I'll just answer them, Paul, very quickly. What's the stocking rate for extensive farming in the eco schemes? Straight answer is that's not yet decided, so we'd certainly welcome people's views on what might be an appropriate stocking rate for extensive farming in eco schemes. This next question was, and it's a subset of a question, but will the Department have full management and oversight of eco schemes? The straight answer is yes, we will. And then the last question was, what eco scheme proposals are there for tillage farmers? So we're still looking at the options for all of the actions, but there are a number of actions already that tillage farmers are doing. Most tillage farmers will be very familiar with EFAs and that. So as it's set out on page 24, the consultation document, one of the options being looked at is effectively building on that EFA requirement within GAC 9. So that's something that virtually all tillage farmers would be very familiar with. Another possible action being looked at is around the area of precision agriculture. So that's them up to date, I think, Paul. And then back to you.
Okay, thanks, David. So just on, I don't know, Josephine, did you want to add anything in relation to organics as far as the AECM is concerned?
Thanks, Paul. I think the question asked was, are organic farmers still going to be excluded from the new AECM? And I suppose it's envisaged that organic farmers will gain priority access into the new AECM, but just because of double funding issues, certain actions, they may not be eligible to take up certain actions. And I suppose the details of this still have to be worked out. And maybe Kevin, you might like to come in on that, or maybe I've answered it.
Yeah, thanks, Josephine. No, I think you've answered the question. Again, yes, registered organic farmers will get priority access to the AECM, but double funding will still apply for certain actions in the AECM. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, folks. I'm going to move on if I can. And again, apologies. I'm trying to do my best in terms of finding who has microphones and who has also maybe raised their hands on the chat as well. So I'm going to try and bring in as many people as I can over the next little while. First of all, I'm going to ask for, I think Paula Butler online. I think you had your hand up there, and as far as I can see, you do have access to a microphone. So Paula.
Hi, how are you? I just wanted to check in relation to the organic scheme. We fell through the cracks in that we're not entitled to the organic scheme. We got moved from the organic scheme into TAMS 2, I think, because I'm not a farmer, so I'm not au fait with all the words. So we got moved into TAMS 2 and we're not entitled to get any grant or any support to put up a new shed or expand. So all I keep hearing is everybody talking about, putting money into organics and expanding, and we actually have the ability to do it. We have the sales. We're the biggest supplier of organic eggs outside, say, of Monaghan. Sorry, I was out walking. And we're not entitled to any grant at all. So what I wanted to say was, could we, the likes of us, be included in the next scheme where if you're not a farmer, per se, like we don't get single farm payment, we're not in the national environment schemes, and we're not in any scheme. So we don't fit the criteria to apply for any grant. So if there was anyone that's interested in organic like ourselves, you actually are entitled to nothing. Now you are entitled to, you know, if you go back to the organic scheme through, we got a grant, say, for machinery, you know, a packing machine, but to put up a new shed or to try expand the business, we fell through the cracks and were not included in anything.
Okay, well, again, Paul, I mean, obviously, I'd like you to be able to maybe submit that as part of your submission to us in terms of issues that you feel might not be addressed fully in the CAP strategic plan. But I'm not sure if colleagues want to respond to that in the meantime, either Kevin or Oliver, in the context of support, in particular in the circumstances that.
Just in relation to a processor grant, and there is an organic processing grant, and that is for organic processors, and I think the caller said that they were an egg processor. So there is grants available for sorting, packing, all that type of work, and that is a grant available up to 700,000 over the lifetime of the scheme, and that was extended by the minister earlier this year. So that grant is available up to the end of 2022. So that is one that's there. Maybe Oliver might wish to speak about the actual TAMS grant itself. Okay, thank you.
Okay, hello. Under TAMS 2, the grant aiding of new poultry houses was not an eligible investment. I'm familiar with the case, so that was the background there, that new poultry houses were not available to any farmers under TAMS 2, be it organic or conventional. That's something that we'll definitely consider under the new proposals. So we welcome any of this comments on that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for those, folks. I'm going to ask the next one that I can see that may have a microphone also, Anton O'Quinn, I think. Anton, I think you had input a question or raised a hand there in terms of asking a question. So can you come in there, please?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Thanks for letting us come in there. Does the department envisage a scenario whereby naked land will be able to obtain entitlements similar to the Scottish derogation in the previous CAP reform? And also, I have a question in relation to the forgotten farmer category. What do you envisage the changes being, or the sort of disadvantaged category being like there? And will it be retrospective for farmers who have passed the age of 41? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Anton. I'm going to ask Fran Moran maybe to come back on those couple of points. Just first of all on the entitlements question, and then on forgotten farmers, if you can, Fran, please.
Okay. Hi, Anton. So in reverse order, I suppose, the forgotten farmer issue. So it's not decided yet. That's the short answer to that. Yes, we have made a commitment that we will look at that issue, but exactly what is to be done is not sorted out yet and has not been decided. And as you know yourself, just even defining who that group of people are is not even straightforward on its own. So that's something to bear in mind. And if you have suggestions or you have you know, kind of ideas around that, we would be glad to hear them from you. So then around naked land entitlements, and there's quite a few questions in around this kind of area, things like consolidation or stacking of entitlements, and so on. And I suppose linked to that are there going to be reference years for payment entitlements going forward? So we'll take all those as a group. So first of all, it's worth saying at this point that think of the new CAP that there is no new allocation of entitlements in the new CAP, unlike there was in 2015. So no entitlements are created or destroyed in the process of the new CAP. If you have, as a farmer, if you have 23.29 entitlements on the 31st of December, on the 1st of January, you will have 23.29 entitlements. regardless of the land that the eligibility changes or whatever might happen with regard to land. So you will not be able to go and spread those entitlements out over land that might be naked, nor will you be able to do the reverse, where you could consolidate down. So that there's just no facility there in any of the regulations that would allow that to happen. Scottish derogation was a particular measure. I think there was about 300 or so farmers came in under Scotty at the time. And that was because there was a new allocation of entitlements back in 2015. But there is no new allocation of entitlements this time around. So it is very unlikely that there would be any kind of situation like Scottish derogation. Now, if a farmer, if you're a farmer who can qualify under the National Reserve for an allocation of entitlements, then absolutely that will exist into the future along similar lines to what there is there at the moment. There will be changes undoubtedly to that, but there or thereabouts that will be available to you. And so because there is no allocation of entitlements, no entitlements created or destroyed, there are no reference years attached to entitlements this time out like there was back in 2015. I hope that answers those, Paul. Feel free to come back if there's more.
No, thanks very much for that, Fran. And again, I'm going to go back and try a couple of people that I think had issues with getting access to a microphone earlier. I'm going to go back to Pat McCormack and Edmund Graham. So I might just try Pat first. If can you hear us okay, Pat, or can you unmute your microphone and make your comments, please?
Hello, Chairman. This here is Patrick McCormick. However, I think you're mistaken me for the ICMSA man. I'm the IFA Chairman for County Monaghan. A man
Apologies,
of the same
Pat.
name.
Yes, I might have been confused with that. Go ahead.
I'll speak if you don't mind when I'm in. Look, at the Minister McConaughey went out to Brussels and successfully negotiated a deal for 85% convergence. The question I have, why are we voting tonight on a higher level of convergence than that? I also want to ask the question, can the convergence be taken in a staged incremental basis over the next number of years and perhaps not fully implemented until 2026? I also note in the different modelling examples that you showed that in each and every one of them, it was assumed that the farmers would be able to avail of the eco-scheme money. Can you give us assurances that that eco-scheme money, that the options available will be suitable for farmers to be able to access that money? And finally, as regards the CRISS scheme, it would seem to me that the smaller the farmer you are, perhaps that it's not exactly fair on you, because it's a percentage of your money is taken. However, if you have less hectares than the amount of hectares that the money is divided over, you might finish up getting less money back. Say if you had, for example, 25 hectares and it was distributed over the first 30, you might actually finish out giving out more money than you get back in. Am I correct in that assumption? Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. I might ask Fran maybe to just come in with a couple more detailed comments just around the modelling exercise on one of the two of the points that you mentioned there. But just, I suppose, just on a couple of more general points that you made around the, why we're voting on the higher level of convergence. Yes, it's true that that the package that was agreed, the reform package that was agreed, landed on a minimum level of 85% of convergence, but that is a minimum level of 85% under the regulations. So essentially, it is open to member states to potentially go higher than that. And I suppose the purpose simply of the question was to gauge people's views around the level of convergence. And the Minister had said that he would consult with people around the issues in relation to direct payments, the targeting and distribution of direct payments generally, and that we would try and have a good conversation about that over the next number of weeks, which will be informed by that modelling exercise that you mentioned. So So the reason essentially for voting on that is purely to get people's views on what they feel is the appropriate level of convergence to achieve. And I think you've seen clearly some of the indications or some of the views that are present there in terms of the responses to the poll that we had a little earlier on. More generally, just the point that you made around eco-scheme money and about options being available for all farmers. And I mean, David or others can come in here in a moment, but I think, you know, from our point of view, we do want the eco-scheme to be as simple as possible. We want it to be available to all farmers. We want it to be such that access is not denied to farmers and that everybody has an opportunity to participate in the eco-scheme, and obviously to be paid accordingly for their involvement in the eco-scheme. So I think in a very simple way, we are trying to keep it simple. We are trying to make it available to as many farmers as possible. And that will be the intention as we go through the process of finalising our thinking around that particular element of the CAP strategic plan over the next while. So that's just maybe a couple of more general comments. I don't know, Fran, did you want to comment just on Patrick's comments around the CRISS modelling or more generally on convergence?
Sure. So I think, Paul, you've answered the one already on why did we put up a poll about more than 85% convergence. So 85% is the minimum by 2026. That wouldn't preclude us as such from doing more, and that's why we're asking your views on what you think. And you'll be aware undoubtedly that some people favour going fully flat and some people favour keeping it to the bare minimum. So I think it's a legitimate question to ask. You asked about convergence and how it would be implemented, or would it be delayed or whatever. And at this point, we would imagine that the requirement is to reach 85% convergence by 2026. We are currently at 60% of the average right now, and the intention right now would be that would be done in equal steps over the years from 2023 to 2026. So in year one, it would be, what would that be? About 66 or 7%, something like that. The following year, you would have a minimum of 70-something%, and so on, up to 85%. That is the plan. You asked about the allocation per hectare and about the number of hectares you might have. So I suppose the thing is that if you have 25 hectares and you have 25 entitlements, your contribution would be on the basis of those percentage from those 25 entitlements, and you would receive back the front-loaded payment on the 25 eligible hectares you might have. In that case, you're kind of putting in one amount and you're getting out another amount. So yes, yes, absolutely, it is linked to the number of hectares, the eligible hectares that you have. It's not so, the payment is not so much linked to the number of entitlements though, or it doesn't seem from the legislation that it will be. So if you had 30 hectares, 25 entitlements, you could, and it was paid on 30 hectares, then you would receive that payment on all 30. So it's quite complicated, but there are sets of rules that are laid down there, and of course we'll be making those clear to everybody as we go along. And then I don't know if David wants to comment on the question about Eco-scheme, but I think that's mine answered.
Okay, thanks, Fran. I think, David, I probably covered the point on eco-schemes. I'd like to maybe move on if I can to bring in a couple more questions, if that's okay. I'm going to try Edmund Graham again, if that's okay. Edmund, I know we promised just getting you in a little earlier, but I think maybe the microphone issues have been sorted. So can you give us your comment or question? If you can unmute your microphone and join us there, please. Yeah, I'm not sure if we're still having problems there, but we can't establish that connection with Edmund.
His mic is live if he can unmute himself, Paul.
Yeah, I've asked him to unmute, but it doesn't seem to be working there at the moment, and he seems to have gone from the attendee list actually now, just that I'm flicking down through the list again, so I'm not sure whether he's still with us at the moment. But just to mention, folks, by the way, I know it is just 9 o'clock now, but we'll just extend the running of the webinar for a little while longer, just to take in a few more questions, because we did have an issue with people joining or linking by microphone earlier this evening. So we'll take a few more questions over the next maybe 15 or 20 minutes to run it on a bit longer. and then we'll conclude with a couple of remaining polling questions that we want to give you. So I might just again try and identify people that may have a microphone. I think is there Rosemary McDonough, I think, wanted to ask a question as well. I don't know, Rosemary, can you hear us okay? You might unmute your microphone if you want to ask a question or make a comment.
Okay, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. And to all the departments, thank you very much. So I suppose my question to you comes around, I had emailed it in earlier on this evening, I'm sure you see it there on the screen, but I am from County Galway and I'm the National Chair of the Farm Business Committee. And in general, I would like to put it to you that you talk about how best to achieve the economic, environmental and social objectives of the new CAP. But can I put it to you this evening that the economic implications for farm family incomes and the economic sustainability of rural Ireland are the greatest challenge of all in this CAP and bring the most fear to farm families. And I really do hope you understand the significance of that point. Now take for instance the Suckler cow. Suckler cow farming is an environmentally friendly farming way of Ireland and in certain parts of Ireland, and indirectly supports schools, shops, agri-stores and many businesses in rural Ireland. So my question to you this evening is, can you confirm that there will be no cap on the Suckler herd, and that in this budget for CAP going forward, that you will take rural Ireland and farm family incomes into consideration when you set, or when the government set, and you are behind the government in the proposals that you do. So when you're setting the new CAP budget, and also that there will be maximum co-financing from the Irish government. So thank you for allowing me to speak and for unmuting me from your side, because we, as well as yourselves, have been using those platforms for as long as COVID is here with us. So I hope you understand that point. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rosemary. And look, I mean, I know we've had to deal with limitations of technology and availability in terms of webinar and other means, but we're doing our best to involve as many people as we can through the best channels that we can. Just on a couple of the points that you made, I think, you know, certainly in terms of economic sustainability, we are trying to achieve that balance between economic sustainability and environmental and social sustainability. We set that out clearly, I think, in the consultation document. And it is a case of striking the balance across those areas. And we do want to hear people's views around how we can achieve that. And again, the modelling document, for instance, that we put out there, the description of the interventions that are proposed as currently laid out in the consultation document, are designed to, again, to get people thinking around how they feel about the balance that we're striking there, for instance, between direct payments measures, but also Pillar 2 measures in terms of getting that balance between economic sustainability and environmental and social sustainability. So look, that is very much at the heart of what we're doing here to try and make sure that that economic sustainability piece is met as part of the process. On your question on the Suckler cow, having no cap on Suckler herd, I think that was probably addressed earlier on, I think, by Maria, in terms of being very clear around what we're proposing in the consultation document. So I'm not sure if Maria wants to add anything to that point. I'll give her an opportunity to do so in a moment, if so, but I think that was addressed earlier. And your final point, I think, on the you know, consideration for farm families when we're agreeing on the budget and the national co-financing. Just to make the point on that, look, the EU element of the budget that's going into the CAP strategic plan has been agreed. That is now clear. And from our perspective, we are trying to ensure, and the Minister is trying to ensure, that we get the maximum possible national co-financing to go with that EU proportion of the budget. That work is ongoing, as I mentioned earlier on, between ourselves and our counterparts in Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. We weren't able to put in full details in the consultation document of the funding profile or the expenditure profiles because that process is still ongoing. But we do hope to complete that process as soon as we can, and we will be able to update people once that process is complete. But again, it is our intention, it is the Minister's intention to secure the maximum possible national co-financing for the EU element of the budget that has already been agreed. So just to mention those points, I don't know, Maria, did you want to comment any further on Rosemary's point in relation to the cap on the suckler herd?
Yeah, just to be very clear, look, the scheme, it doesn't impose a cap on the national herd. Now, I accept what is proposed is a cap on those individual herds that join the suckler scheme, and I accept from the comments tonight and other nights that that's very controversial, and as I said, put in a formal submission in through the process. But it's not, within the cap process, we are not proposing a cap on the national herd or the national suckler herd, but there is a cap within that specific scheme for participants. So again, look, if you object to it, which I hear from what I'm seeing, and I'm seeing the comments in the chat, a lot of people do, you should put in a formal submission. In any event, we will take the comments that were made tonight on board. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Maria. I might just go to then John Coughlin, who also has, I think, his hand raised as well, wanted to come in there to make a point. So John, if you could again unmute your microphone and make your comment or question, please.
Yes, hello, Paul, can you hear me? Hello, yeah.
Yes, can hear you.
First of all, thanks very much, Paul, for letting me in. But I did put in a question earlier on, and it's in relation, first of all, to farmers who are in derogation. And I think if the department are serious about the environment and about climate change mitigations, what derogation farmers are doing has got to be included under the eco schemes. And I think part and parcel of that is that most derogation farmers that I know are working really hard and are, a lot of them to the pin of their collar, to comply with the derogation, that they will walk away from the eco schemes going forward if we're not careful. We can't expect farmers to do more and more and more all the time without being properly compensated or without being recognised for it. And I think, you know, the ones that are doing the good work at the moment have to be recognised for that. Second question I have, Paul, is in relation, look, we've seen the one sector, or one of the sectors that has been really impacted in this reform is the calf to beef or the store to beef farmer. He is the farmers whose income is made up of 100% and maybe more of the single payment. And they are the farmers that are going to lose most through convergence in this reform. And I see no schemes being put forward for store to beef or calf to beef. And what's going to happen is, if those farmers aren't going to be financially supported going forward, you're going to see beef being finished in feedlots because farm families won't be able to survive on the incomes that are there. So I would ask the department to look seriously at the calf to beef or the store to beef farmer, and also the derogation farmer, and realise that farmers can't take much more regulation. What's going on at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, John, thanks for those points. And again, as with other contributors, we'd ask that you would follow those up with your submissions and with your proposals and suggestions in terms of your response to the consultation. I think, look, I would take those as comments for the moment, which maybe I'd ask you to follow up on. I'm not sure if colleagues want to comment immediately or respond immediately to those. I think we take the point in terms of where you feel that you know, things could be done within the CAP strategic plan that aren't covered to the appropriate degree from your own point of view. So we take that on board. But I'm going to take those as a comment maybe for the moment and ask you maybe to follow that up as part of your own submission to the consultation, unless colleagues want to make any particular comments on that. I'll give them an opportunity to do so very quickly. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next question. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question if that's okay with everybody. If I can, then I'm going to ask for, I think Michael Biggins, I think, wanted to come in and ask a question here as well. So could I ask Michael, again, if you could unmute your microphone and
hello, Paul, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me fine, Michael, go ahead. Yes,
thanks, Paul. Look, just a couple of issues. First of all, I think the lack of figures in the whole strategic plan is kind of baffling. that you know, we're speaking in the dark as such as regards so many schemes. There's absolutely no figures available. I appreciate why they aren't, but it's just difficult to work it all out. Just on it states on the Agri-Environmental Climate Measure that farmers who participate will have one Agri-Environmental Climate Measure contract only. Just does that mean that the pearl mussel, hen harrier, burden payments will all be gone? Or, you know, because I know those farmers, they qualified for both the GLAS and the hen harrier. Also, they say that you're expecting about 50,000 farmers are expected to take up the Agri-Environmental Climate Measure. Seeing there's 48,000 farmers in GLAS and over 11,000, I think, applied for REAP. You know, where are the other 9,000 going to go for a scheme if it's going to be limited to 50,000? And just to finish, Chairman, as a suckler farmer, I'm happy to hear that there's no cap on sucklers, but you know, I think the idea of if there's going to be a reference year, I think the suckler farmer should have a choice of which year would suit him individually himself, rather than you're talking about an average of 3 years or something like that. You know, I think the farmer should have a choice of which year he chooses as regards what suits him. And just, I think, when it was mentioned earlier, land re-wetting, it's a huge you know, it's something that people get very annoyed about. It's fine for the farmer undertaking the measure himself if that's what suits him, but the impact on a neighbouring farmer, I think that has got to be fully assessed before any farmer is allowed to go ahead with re-wetting, that he'd have the agreement of neighbouring farmers. Thanks, Chairman.
Okay, thanks for that, Michael. I think, look, I think I mentioned the point about the lack of figures in the draft plan or in the draft interventions, and I've explained the reason for that. We do hope to be able to do that very soon on foot of our engagement, as I mentioned, with Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. So we will try and update those as soon as that becomes possible. So I know it's not ideal in that sense, but we will try and update those as quickly as we can. Again, a couple of the other points I think I was going to take as comments, and maybe again you might follow up in terms of your submission to the process, in particular around the sucklers and the reference year, for instance, about the farmer making that choice. Again, I'm not sure colleagues want to come back briefly and comment on that, but I think that may be something that you want to submit as part of your own response to the consultation. The other couple of points you mentioned, I think, were around on the AECM, around one contract and what that might mean, particularly in terms of participation already in things like hen harrier. And then you also had a couple of comments on re-wetting and the impact on neighbouring farms. So I was going to ask maybe Josephine Brennan, who's gave us a bit of an update earlier on some of the questions that have come in on the AECM scheme. Maybe Josephine, you might explain this notion around the one contract piece and also maybe on the re-wetting.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I suppose the proposal for the new AECM would be one contract, and I think Ted in his presentation briefly explained the structure of the new AECM. So it's one AECM scheme, but there will be two elements to it essentially. So there will be a general AECM which will be applicable, or all farmers will be eligible to come into this, and then there will be a higher level area B. So that and farmers for this will be identified through higher priority assets that they have, and I suppose these are currently being identified by the farmers. So a farmer will have the option to come into the general scheme, and if they're eligible they can join the higher level scheme. So essentially they'll have one contract, and I suppose with the current EIPs like the hen harrier and the pearl mussel, etc., they will be finished before the new AECM starts, and I suppose there will be other EIPs coming on stream. So I suppose the one contract, it mainly refers to the new AECM and the two elements within it. So even if whichever element you come in, you'll have one contract. In terms of land re-wetting, I suppose this is still being looked at. It's only a proposal for the new AECM. The extent of derivation, it still, I suppose, needs to be looked at on that. And we do acknowledge that there could be consequences for, and unintended consequences for neighbours, and all that will have to be looked into before we finalise any proposal.
Okay, thanks for that, Josephine. A couple of other questions that are coming from people, which I might maybe finish off with two or three more. I see Ollie White, I think, wanted to ask a question or make a comment, so I might ask Ollie White, please, if you can unmute your microphone again, please. Ollie, I'm not sure if you're still there, if you're having issues with your microphone. Just to make sure that your microphone is unmuted if you can. I think it's been unmuted from our end. So if you could unmute your microphone and put your question. Otherwise, I might move on and we could come back in a moment. Okay, apologies. I don't think we were able to get contact there or question from Ollie.
Can you hear
Sorry,
me there?
Ollie, yes.
Yes,
I can, yeah.
Grand, fine. Yes, Mr. Chairman, just all farmers accept that the department here would be honest brokers in this whole new cap thing, and it probably is a poison chalice that you are given to keep everyone happy, you know, but we come from a tillage farm and a beef farm, and tillage has proved itself over the years to be the best performer in the environmental section, the lowest carbon footprint, all that kind of stuff. It's there. Look on the Teagasc figures bear that out. So Teagasc figures also show that the tillage, the tillage 70% of the income comes from the single farm payment. So with the new scheme here, Convergence is going to hit us hard, and all the other thing, the front loading, all that's we're going to lose most tillage farmers, because you need a certain scale to make a living out of it. They're going to be hit very hard. So it's very hard to understand how that happened, and why there's no reward for tillage farmers who have, in the last 3 caps, have been doing environmental things that other sectors hadn't to do. And I think that's a given. Most people would agree with that thing. The second point I'd make is, since CAP started, and I'm been farming for most of that time, every time there's a review or a new CAP, we're being told less complication and less this, that, and other, and it's going to be simpler and everything else. We are at a stage now that this new CAP, that consultants are going to have to be used nearly on every farm to sort out all the applications, all the schemes, all those kind of things. And it seems to me that it's mammon from heaven for consultants with this whole thing, when simple, uncomplicated thing could have come in there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thanks, Ollie. Look, again, we'll take those points on board, and I'd ask you to obviously follow up in terms of your own submission to the consultation process around obviously the issues affecting tillage farmers, and look, I'll take the point in relation to the Convergence and CRISS impacts. And again, like I say, as it's set out in the strategic plan, they're the proposed interventions, and if you wish to come back and comment in more specific terms in terms of tillage farmers, then please do follow up those comments as part of that process. I think similarly on the point that you make about consultants and I suppose money being paid to advisors for participation in schemes, that is a point that's been made to the department previously. It has come up in previous consultations. It is something that's referred to often when we consult also with the National Stakeholder Consultative Committee. So we are aware of farmer concerns around that, and that is taken on board in the context of the design of the schemes across the board. There are situations where, you know, specific expert input is required, and where the nature of participation in the scheme does require that advice and support. But look, we are aware of farmer concerns around that, and we will reflect on that as we go through the process of finalising the interventions in the strategic plans. But again, like I say, there is a role for that specific advice or specific specialist advice where we want to achieve particular benefits in terms of the implementation of particular schemes. So Again, I would take that as a comment from you for the moment, and again, please do follow up as part of the consultation, and we will take that on board. I was going to just come to another couple of comments, if I can, just to finish off. We might just finish off and finish it around 9:30, if that's okay with everybody. So you might just bear with us. We also have a couple of questions, final questions on our polls that we wanted to put to you this evening, which we might just get to very briefly as well. I'm just going to ask Peter Craven, if you're still with us, if you could come in and put your question. And then I think Thomas Burke also is on the line. He wants to put a question also. So I'll finish with the questions from Peter and from Thomas. If I can ask Peter first to come in, if you can unmute your microphone and put your point, please.
Sorry, Peter, if you can just unmute again.
Don't think.
Hello.
I don't think we're able to hear.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Sorry, Peter. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Peter,
just wondering how you arrived at the 66,000 single farm payment. The average payment is less than 10,000, but the minimum that we're allowed to vote on is 66,000. 66,000, 100,000, or somewhere in between. That's my first question. And another question I have is there anything to prevent farmers from having many herd numbers, and whatever figure you decide on, let it be 66 or 100,000 or whatever, that they don't have a number, 5, 6, 7 herd numbers, and draw the payment on every herd number? Those are my two questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Peter. Sorry, you broke up slightly there just on the second question, but I think it was in relation to farmers with many herd numbers, but I might just come back to you in a second just to check that. But just on the 66,000, how it arrived at, that's essentially just reflecting the options that are available to member state in the regulations in terms of capping and reduction of payments. So there is the option to cap at €100,000, obviously, but also to apply essentially an 85% reduction to all payments over €60,000. So again, as part of our modelling exercise, our calculations, and Fran might wish to comment on this more again in a moment, but on the basis of our payment profile and on the basis of the level of payments that are going to farmers in Ireland, if we were to apply that 85% reduction to all payments above 60,000, it would result in a de facto cap of €66,000, which means that no farmer would get more than €66,000 by the end of the period. So that's just a reflection of our own payment profile when matched with the option that's available for member states in the regulation. Fran, I don't know if there's anything you need to add to that or left out there, or comment otherwise on the second element of Peter's question.
I don't think so, Paul. I mean, maybe it's worth saying that, you know, in addition to what you've said already about what the regulations say or will say, the regulations there are the rules for that. So although there might say there was a desire in Ireland to cap all of the payment above 60,000 or above 40,000 or above 30,000, we will not be able to do that. We'll be precluded from doing that. We need to follow the rules that are set out, and those rules, that's why we came up with that 66,000 figure. That would be the most stringent application of capping that the rules would allow.
So what you're saying is the European Parliament have set, I'd have thought that something around 40 or 50,000, the average wage would have been plenty to cap it at, in view of the fact that the average payment is less than 10,000. So are you, can you put it out, 1 second, can you put it on record here tonight that the European Parliament have set a figure of 66,000 for our state?
Okay, so let me explain that. So capping is voluntary, so you don't have to implement it. However, if you do implement it, so if Ireland chooses to implement it, then you must cap the BIS payment, and that's the BIS payment only, not including eco-schemes or couple support or any of those other direct payment interventions, only the BIS payment. You must cap that above 100,000 by 100%. So that's the first step. So A, are we going to do it? It's voluntary to do it. If you do it, you must cap the BIS payment above 100,000 by 100%. And then third, if you want, as an optional measure, you can then cap the portion of a BIS payment between 60,000 and 100,000 by up to 85%. 15% of that 40,000 works out at 6 grand. That means an effective cap at 66,000 of BIS payment. That would be the maximum amount of capping we would be allowed to do. Accompanying that, there is the possibility within the regulation, or that will be within the regulations within the agreement, that you could take account of things like some of the firm salaries and a portion of contractors' fees and so on. But naturally, just on a pure admin basis, there's quite a bit of difficulty in doing exactly that. However, that possibility is there for sure. So yes, I can confirm to you that what the political agreement says, capping is voluntary. If you do implement it, it applies to the BIS payment only at 100% above 100,000, and you can go further and reduce the amount of a BIS payment for somebody between 60,000 and 100,000 by up to 85%, in effect giving a maximum BIS payment of 66,000 to somebody. For what it's worth, if you look at the modelling,
have your hands tied on that.
Yes, they do. And if you look at the modelling, you'll see that there's, well, I can't quite remember the figure now, but it's like 160, 170 farmers would be capped above 66,000. And the amount of funding that would be released through application of that without any deduction of salaries would be somewhere, depending on how everything else is shared out within the ceiling, would be somewhere between 1 and 2.5 million, there or thereabouts. So it's not, in terms of the 1.186 billion, it's not a crazy huge amount of money, even though between 1 and 2.5 million is a huge amount of money. But in terms of the overall, it's a very small percentage.
Okay, thanks. I'd like to just move on and take one final question from Thomas Burke that I mentioned earlier on. So I'm going to do that before we ask our final couple of questions in our poll. So Thomas, if you can hear us, if you could mute your, unmute your microphone and make your point, if you could, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thomas Burke here, IFA rep for Kildare, West Wicklow IFA. Now, there's been, since the meeting last night, there's been people contact and say, like the likes of us reps all day long, like, you know, and like it's all got to do with maybe suckler cows, and people are a bit unsure themselves, like when you're talking maybe capping and different bits and pieces like that. But the thing about it is, we're after coming through 5% reductions, and the popularity of the sector, how popular the sector is, that should determine numbers of suckler cows. So I mean, the question of capping is only frightening people. We came through the 5% reduction, and is there any possibility of a 5% sway or 5 to 10% sway on the numbers that is being talked about? You know what I mean? The lower capping rates or whatever, you know, and proper reference here. Now, funding has to be addressed, and underspend hasn't been addressed tonight. There's just a few little bits and pieces. Like the requirement in this food ambitions 2030, like we're told, it was mentioned there tonight about promotion of a premium suckler brand, and why wasn't there an ombudsman and UTPs and promotion of the suckler brand all incorporated in food ambitions 2030? TAMS grants definitely has to be geared more towards rural Irish farmers, do you know what I mean, towards rural farms and family farms, because them farms is kind of, I suppose, for want of a better word, have been let fall to the wayside over the years, like, you know, and then it's important that the rural Ireland structure is supported and it is kept there. Now, just one quick thing before I go, in the promotion of the premium suckler brand in England, to have a red tractor. Every person knows about the red tractor in England. If you're going to buy it off the shelf, and they'll buy that before anything else. But in Ireland, all we have is promotion of the premium Suckler brand, and I think there's an awful lot of work needs to be done there and has to be addressed. And the other thing is QA, like mandatory into QA. That's frightening an awful lot of people. And like QA, as was stated tonight, it's very important for exports from Ireland going out, but it doesn't seem to be as important for beef and sheep or whoever is entered in the country. Now, just goes back to the same thing again. A few weeks ago, it was on Agri-Land or someplace there that there was 500,000 sheep come into the country, and they seem to have vanished. No one seems to know where they are at all. Now, are they attached to the nitrates of this country? Because if it is, input into food strategy has to be questionable. Do you know what I mean? Because, like, where are the figures and the nitrates of all these lambs is coming in? Where's the backup figures, targets, tags, or anything else got to do with these sheep? Thank you.
Okay, look, thanks for that, Thomas. Look, a lot of your comments there went, I suppose, beyond strictly the remit that we have here in terms of looking at the interventions on the CAP strategic plan. So, again, I'm going to take them broadly as comments. And again, maybe just to encourage you to follow up your comments by way of submission to the consultation process. I know a number of your comments were around sucklers and around potential capping, and QA schemes also being used in that context. But again, a lot of those issues were addressed in the course of the discussion earlier, but I might just give Maria Dunn again an opportunity just to make a couple of quick responses if you can, Maria, because I want to move on to finish off on our polling question shortly.
We dealt with the reduction and the QAA, and I'm hearing what you're saying to me. I just wanted to make a quick remark in regards BEAM and the reference years. And yes, we will take the reduction under BEAM and the factor of participants in BEAM into account in the reference years. That's all, Paul.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Maria. So look, folks, I'm conscious of the fact that we have run quite considerably over time, but we did want to just sort out and follow up on some of those issues that we had earlier with microphone contacts. There have been some other questions that have come in the last few minutes on the written submission that people have made on the webinar format there as well. I think a number of them have been addressed. I've just been scrolling quickly through them. A number of them have been addressed in the context of the responses earlier, but we will pick up on those and possibly carry forward any that haven't been addressed. We'll carry them forward into tomorrow night. I think, as I mentioned, I didn't mention earlier, and I should have mentioned also that we do have the presentations that were made by my colleagues earlier. They are available on the website in the same area as you have in relation to the public consultation. And all of the questions asked by the participants over the course of this evening will also be available on the website. They'll be put up on the website in that area as well, as we did with the questions that were submitted by people last night. The other thing I mentioned is that there will be segments of tonight's proceedings covering particular questions and areas that people ask questions on. They'll be made available also on the department's YouTube channel as well, if you go and look at that. And we'll also refer to that in the public consultation area on the website as well, that those clips, those video segments are available for people to look back on in terms of answering those questions as well.